Well, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the ultimate state of the channel in cybersecurity. This is being brought to you by Partner Software. My name is TC Doyle. I am the channel growth evangelist here at Partner. We've got a couple more folks logging on. We're going to start here in a minute or two, but I want to welcome everybody, no matter where in the world you might be. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to get started here in just another minute. So why don't we get started without further ado? For the third time, this is TC Doyle. Welcome everyone to the ultimate state of the channel in cybersecurity. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to provide to you some of the top thinking from industry analysts and channel thought leaders. They're going to be talking about some trends in cybersecurity. We're going to weigh in on recruiting, managing, and rewarding partners, and a whole lot more. And we have just the right expertise and individuals to do that with us. We've got Doug Cahill, he's the Vice President and Group Director of Cybersecurity at ESG. Also, Kevin Rohn, Channel Practice Director at ESG as well. In addition, we've got three top security channel practitioners: John Pepler, Vice President of Worldwide Channels at Bitglass; Karen Paynes, Senior Channel Marketing Manager at Proofpoint; and Matt Coppold, he is the Senior Channel Marketing Manager at Armis. So let's get started. First, what we're going to do is let me give you a sense as to what you can expect. We're going to hear two presentations, one from Doug and then his colleague Kevin. Then we're going to go to a roundtable discussion. We're going to make that interactive and lively throughout the presentation. I'm hoping that you have some questions. If so, type those into the box and I'll get to as many of those as possible. We'll have a roundtable featuring John, Karen, and Matt. But first off, I want to hand it over to Doug Cahill. If you don't know Doug, you should. If you're in the cybersecurity world, he's a big player. He leads ESG's analyst services practices and also is a senior industry analyst covering cloud native security, including DevOps. Prior to joining ESG, Doug was an executive team member at cybersecurity and storage management software vendors in marketing, product management, and biz dev roles focused on go-to-market direction. Doug, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Please, sir, take it away.
Hey, TC, thanks very much, and thanks everybody for joining today. I got to tell everybody, I'm particularly excited about today's presentation because I'm a former channel guy. I spent a number of years earlier in my career doing business development, working with OEMs and strategic alliances and technical alliances and resellers and distributors, and so appreciate the important role that everybody in the channel and basically the ecosystem plays. And at the risk of being maybe a little bit corny, cybersecurity truly is a team sport. We have an incredibly motivated adversary. And so we've really got to be working in concert in a collaborative way to be able to provide businesses, fortified defenses for the ever dangerous threat landscape. I'm going to be sharing with you today a number of ESG research findings as well as ESG's point of view on some of the central topics in cybersecurity, things like zero trust, XDR, Sassy, and more. I'm going to cover a lot of ground, but the point of views I'm going to share and the research is really going to be through a lens of how it's actionable for the ecosystem. So, what we do as a matter of practice in our business is to instrument the buy side of the market. So we conduct an extensive amount of peer level research on how your buyers, your customers think about the problem space, the solutions, their buying intentions, personas, strategic initiatives. And we always sort of translate that. Really, our role in the market is is to do just that. It really sit between the buy side and the sell side and translate on how it's actionable to you. So let's jump right into it. I basically have two sections I'm going to cover. First is sort of widening the aperture and looking broadly at some of the drivers that are impacting cybersecurity today. And then secondly, I'll be getting into some of the key cybersecurity themes and initiatives that CISOs and practitioners are looking at. And TC, I might be, oh, there we go. It's a little bit of lag in the slide movement, so apologies for that. This is the first section we'll get into in terms of the meta trends that are impacting the cybersecurity ecosystem. So ESG conducts an annual technology spending attention study. We've been doing this for 13 years now. It's a research study that is global. It's highly statistically significant. We cover all the major industries. And it flies at sort of a higher altitude, right? We're looking at meta trends. And naturally, one of the questions or series of questions really this year we asked was the impact of the pandemic and work from home around IT spending intentions. Headline here is spending will increase. So as we come out of, thankfully, finally coming out of the pandemic, organizations are retooling. One of the big impacts around remote work has been even a broader adoption of cloud services. I mean, we have remote work and broad adoption of cloud applications, both SaaS and infrastructure as a service. Pre-pandemic, that only accelerated over the last 15 months, which is really sort of evidence here in this slide around the areas in which our respondents indicated that they plan to increase the spend the most over the course of 2021. Public cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity at the top two. Public cloud applications, a close third here, and that's, in large part being driven by increase in collaboration. So, we've all been spending a lot of time on Zoom and using various, messaging platforms, Teams, Slacks, et cetera. Further down the list, you can see obviously incredible interest in AI and ML, which is really for me is enabling technology. I'm not sure you actually go buy AI and ML, right? It's not necessarily a line item. It's in data analytics products. It's certainly in cybersecurity products as well. So public cloud, cybersecurity, leading the charge for spend in 2021. Now we double clicked on cybersecurity. We said, hey, okay, cybersecurity spending is increasing again. It has year over year for the number of years, at least that I've been an industry analyst. So understand, okay, where in the cybersecurity budget organization is going to be increasing spend the most? The theme here is to close a cloud security readiness gap, which is to say that, the degree to which organizations have adopted cloud, both SaaS apps and infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, is well ahead of their organization's readiness to secure that use. There is a readiness gap. It is palatable. It's a super big issue. For example, in another study we ran, 9 out of 10 respondents said that they've got work to do. They need to evolve their cybersecurity program to close that gap. And so, that is clear here, where the top two areas of incremental spend in cyber is cloud infrastructure security and cloud application security. Now, there are other domains in cybersecurity where there is also increased spend. Data security, we have data being created at an enormous rate. It's a data-driven economy. Data is the critical assets, and data is traveling outside of the network perimeter to the edge and the cloud applications. So it's big incremental spend data security. Network security is always a top area of spend. I'm going to talk about Sassy in just a little bit. That's certainly one of the big catalysts for incremental spend on network, and a bunch of other areas. Endpoint, identity, web email, DDoS mitigation, sort of indicative of how this is a fragmented market, which is a theme I'm going to get into just a little bit. Okay. So another question we ask in that annual spending intention study is basically where organizations hamstrung, like where are they limited? That is, where do organizations have the most problematic shortage of skills? So big picture, IT spending is increasing. There is increasing spend on public cloud and cyber. So they have a lot of programs and initiatives that they want to execute over the next little while. But there's an acute shortage of skills in some critical areas that are going to hamper the ability of these organizations to really execute and deliver on those initiatives. Cybersecurity is always the top here. It's really frustrating for all of us in this industry. We know this is a perennial issue. Once again, this year, nearly half the respondents said, yeah, you know what, the top area in which I've got an acute shortage of skills is cybersecurity. Right behind that, in addition to AI and ML, is cloud architecture and planning. So frame this up, right? It's sort of like, hey, we're already broadly adopting cloud services. We had remote work. Pandemic only accelerated that. Top areas of spend in public cloud and cyber. Yet organizations have an acute, problematic shortage in those two areas where they want to increase spend the most. Okay, so let's talk about some solves here. Services plays a huge role here in closing that gap between intended spend, shortage of skills, and the cloud security readiness gap. So where we, lean in and consult our vendor clients is to say, hey, because of that backdrop, your customers either need services from you, so you either stand up native services, or ideally you're going to work with service providers that are, indexed there. They have a core competency. That's their business, to have those sort of, life cycle set of services, from assessment to consulting to managed services. And so make sure you have a set of, service providers that are part of your partner ecosystem, and convey that at every step of your sales cycle, because you may have a qualified prospect. If you're a vendor and you're selling product, you may have a qualified prospect and they simply can't consume it. They don't have the wherewithal, quite frankly. They may have budget, but even just budget really isn't enough. They have to have staff and resources, and if you can make it available as a managed service, either as yourself or vis-a-vis, ideally an ecosystem of partners, all the better. Okay, so that's sort of a higher altitude view of some of the drivers in the cybersecurity industry these days. I want to take a level down in this section and really sort of look at it at a program level and really speak to where there are partner opportunities. This is really a retooling of cybersecurity programs. I appreciate this is really basic, but if we break down cyber programs into people, process, and technology, and then the complicated environment, the threat landscape, a lot of these domains are very much in transition, which means there's really great opportunities for everybody in the partner ecosystem. The first point I want to make is just share a data point from our parent company, TechTarget, that I think is, really illustrative of the market opportunity for everybody, which is if you provide thought leadership, right? If you engage with the market and your prospects on helping them better understand some of the major shifts in the market and these meta trends, where the sort of confusion and where they need a roadmap, you're much more likely to win business. So 91% say I'm more likely to engage with a vendor who educated them on a particular topic. So what are those topics? Suffice to say, when it comes to cybersecurity, it's just an incredibly fragmented, confusing market. And so this is, by no means a be-all, end-all list of industry dynamics, but I'm sure that these topics are going to resonate with everybody. The first one is vendor consolidation. We know cybersecurity teams, project teams, cloud engineering teams, everybody who's a consumer of cybersecurity products and services are suffering from point tool fatigue. There's too many vendors, too many tools. That leads to poor ROI and really a notable intent to consolidate. That fragmented market really makes it difficult for buyers to engage the ecosystem. So for example, like every year when I go to RSA conference, fortunately couldn't go this year, it was virtual, but in prior years that I've gone over the last, 10, 12 years, and I walk the show floor, I just think about the buyer and how confusing hitting the show floor must be. It is just a sea of noise. So clarity of messaging and positioning and value is just incredibly important to really land your product and your value prop with the target market. So part and parcel consolidation is the emergence of platforms, right? So there's a clear intent to buy more from fewer vendors, which means an integrated set of platforms. ESG doesn't believe that there is an Uber cybersecurity platform. There is not an easy button here, but good news, there is the emergence of what we call sort of mini platforms of value across multiple domains. Sassy is one. I'm going to share with you a couple of thoughts on Sassy coming here in just a moment. But Sassy really fundamentally is the replatforming of network security controls at the edge to secure to the cloud access requirements. Hey, this was important before the pandemic. With the increase in remote work, it has become even more important to have the right model, set of services that allows you to secure how your remote workers can access cloud services. I know we're just about coming out of the pandemic, but our research also shows that while we will go back to the office to some degree, we're going to be working from home more than we did pre-pandemic. We're going to have a hybrid workplace. And so that means that organizations are going to need to be able to have the ability to secure any user at any location, anytime, accessing any application. That's a tough remit for IT and cybersecurity teams, and Sassy is one of the big plays in the industry that promises to fill that void. Another big initiative is around XDR, or Extended Threat Detection and Response, and this is extending endpoint detection and response to secure the broader attack surface. Now, when EDR first hit, it was really around sort of when ransomware was really becoming problematic and we were getting fileless attacks, and there was a lot of focus on securing the endpoint. And traditional antivirus and endpoint protection controls, weren't providing enough efficacy in preventing those attacks. And so security operations teams needed the ability to basically unpack attacks, be able to respond, and maybe even do threat hunting. The problem in the first generation of those controls is they were just too complicated, right? The EDR controls were really relegated to sort of the top end of the market. So those companies that were really well resourced and they had a really, sophisticated set of skills in their SOC. What happened though is not only did the tools get better, but we had the emergence of MDR, managed detection and response. So the service providers really filled an important void. I love that because the sophistication of those capabilities became available to a broader set of the market, so more of the market can be protected. XDR is going to follow the same path. Zero trust, boy, if there is one phrase in the cybersecurity market where there is just a ton of equity and buzz right now, it's around zero trust. It's really fundamentally the retooling of cybersecurity programs being driven by a number of factors. One is the eroding perimeter. So as more data and applications infrastructure go to the cloud, we can rely less on a perimeter-centric approach to authenticate and authorize access to applications and data. It doesn't mean the perimeter goes away, by the way. I frankly think people who do what I do for a living as industry analysts sort of overstate the demise of the network perimeter. Most companies operate in a hybrid multi-cloud environment. They still have a physical perimeter, but they also edge, branch, offices, remote employees. So there's sort of this amorphous perimeter is the way I would describe it. And then we need to be thinking about zero trust not so much as a product, but as an approach. And therefore, there's a great opportunity for the ecosystem to provide consultation. I've got a couple of thoughts coming up on zero trust in just a second. And fourth, and certainly last but not least, is just services, as I mentioned before, plays such an incredible role here, both on tactical and strategic dimensions. So, there's sort of the tactical around staff augmentation and maybe doing firewall rule management and so forth and product deployment. But the other dimension of the skill set shortage is not just sheer sort of people in seats, but it's really like advanced knowledge of the threat landscape, really understanding things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and attack chains and indicators of compromise. And fortunately, there's service providers that can bring to bear, that level of sort of expertise to be able to do incident response and even threat hunting. And part and parcel of that is really MDR, as I mentioned, to really make EDR and now XDR offerings more broadly accessible to the market. So let me double click into a couple of dynamics here, starting with consolidation. This is a study we also run on an annual basis, and you can see here that there is absolute intent to consolidate the number of cybersecurity vendors with whom organizations do business. So you can see this is sort of a work in process or a classic maturity model. This is not an overnight flip the switch, right? I've talked to a number of organizations that say, hey, part of my journey to the cloud gives me the opportunity to revisit the set of point tools I have and to really consolidate. So the advice we give to vendors is consolidation is being driven by CISOs and CIOs. Apologies for the typo there. So you really ought to leverage those relationships. So organizations that have those C-level relationships are going to be in a good position. Totally makes sense here, right, for the C-suite to be more involved because you're betting more on fewer vendors, and so you really want to understand, is that vendor aligned with the way you view your priorities and your product roadmap? Vertical knowledge is super important here also. So this comes through really clear in the research. Is as I bet more on fewer vendors and I rely on them more, I want to make sure they understand my business, they understand my verticals. Obviously, you need to cite a focus on customer success. I can tell you some qualitative research we've conducted over the years, because there is so much churn in the cybersecurity market. Those vendors and those integrators and resellers who are maniacally focused on customer success through sales engineers and solution architects in the field have a much better retention and renewal rates than those that sort of hit and run in their sales cycle. Okay, I'm going to pick it up here because I know we've got a lot of other ground to cover. I want to share with you ESG's point of view on zero trust. So I'll just sort of build this out. First of all, what is zero trust? Might be a good place to start, right? Sort of an ambiguous term. Zero trust is predicated on a view that everything is potentially malicious. Every user, every network device, everything that is trying to access a corporate asset is potentially malicious. So we used to have a trust but verify approach. That was a common expression in cybersecurity, which basically means, oh, I'm going to give you access and then just sort of verify over time. Now it's like, no, I'm not going to give you access. I'm going to really authenticate you, maybe through things like multi-factor authentication, and then I'm going to continuously authenticate to make sure that you are who you are, and I'm going to limit the scope vis-a-vis a least privilege access methodology. So you limit blast radius. Okay, so opportunity around zero trust is users need clarity on where solutions fit in the broader zero trust framework. Zero trust It's not a product. So just like AI it is not a product. You can't go buy zero trust. You can buy solutions. You can engage with service providers that support a zero trust strategy and framework. And so it's important for the ecosystem to convey how your services and how your products are fit into a broader zero trust initiative that your organizations would have. Now, it crosses buying centers. This is the second point. So solutions that allow you to bridge buying centers and support multiple personas and thus break down silos will be really well received by the market, because these are initiatives that cross organizational boundaries. And so really having that strategic view on how you can bring those teams together is really important. Now, zero trust doesn't always mean there's going to be net new products. Organizations, of course, want to leverage prior investments, and so they may do things like, hey, I'm going to leverage current controls I have for things like data classification and security to see if that gets me a little further along on my zero trust journey. Okay, next big theme here is around XDR. So I sort of describe this as the the evolution of endpoint detection and response. The reason is obvious, is the attack surface is expanding, especially because of remote work. The number one area in our research where organizations want to expand detection and response is cloud. Completely makes sense. Cloud is no longer for things like tertiary storage or second-tier applications. SaaS applications and cloud-native apps, they're running business-critical operations. So of course, the SOC needs to extend their visibility from a threat detection and response to threat hunting perspective into the organization's cloud footprint. This is a nascent market, right? This market is absolutely up for grabs. There are no clear winners at this point in market development. There's a need for consultation. So great opportunity for vendors, channel partners, integrators to be working together. Now, XDR is all about threats. The other side of the XDR coin, if you will, is about risk. So this is about things like vulnerability management and really getting a grip on your attack surface and doing pen testing. And so offering a comprehensive view around, yes, XDR is really important, but so is risk. And bringing those two sides together is a tremendous market opportunity for the ecosystem. Now, because this market is still in play, there's no clear winners. What are the critical success factors here? Well, it's going to be innovation that really helps organizations visualize their attack surface, automate their response, be able to have a highly scalable platform based on graph databases and data lakes. And usability is a huge issue. So just like first generation EDRs were a little hard to operate, XDR controls, that sort of UX usability is going to be really, really hard. So you can remediate time to detection and, of course, time to remediation, and really bring dwell time down as much as possible. Okay, next one is Sassy. Tremendous amount of market buzz here. Companies like Zscaler and others were sort of, sort of re-architecting how we thought about network security controls. Now we have a number of Sassy vendors in the market. This was happening already, but again, remote work certainly accelerated that. Now, a bit of connect the dots. So many organizations have had to really scale their virtual private networks here with remote work. Others are also transitioning to zero trust network access. So that's sort of the common thread between Sassy and zero trust. So vendors should really tie those stories together in a cohesive way. Again, part and parcel to this, hey, ideally I can leverage current investments. So vendors, integrators, service providers, you want to be able to also understand what's currently in place and see if organizations can leverage those current investments. SaaS is a big play. It's typically, and we're talking about converging, CASB, DLP, SWIGs at minimum, maybe even remote browser isolation and other technologies. So it's a journey organizations are going to go on. And so recognizing that and having a consultative approach with your clients is going to be really important. So security outcomes are obviously really, are really important, but so are other business related outcomes like operational efficiency. So, sort of conveying Sassy in the context of modern workflows and how you make your end user community the most effective and you can meet your business objectives and be more of an agile enterprise. That's all part and part of the Sassy story. Okay, thanks very much for listening and looking forward to joining later in the Q&A.
All right, so now this is TC Doyle coming back, and we're going to hand it over to Kevin. I'm going to play Voice of God here in the background for a minute. Doug, that was fabulous. I know people are going to have a lot of questions on that. If you guys don't know Kevin, he's an entrepreneurial executive with executive client-facing background experiences in services-driven technology businesses. His career spans UBM, PartnerPath, and organizations. Kevin Rohn, please, sir, take it away.
Thanks, TC, and welcome again, everybody. Thanks for carving out some time in your busy days. Kevin Rohn here, and I lead one of the practice areas at ESG that we call Channel Acceleration. My team stands side by side with Doug and his technology experts. We work closely with the channel leaders at ESG's clients on go-to-market strategy, program design and development, and speaking to and through partners of all types to communicate value propositions, joint solution value, and a whole variety of things. So we spend a lot of time talking with those channel leaders and also speaking to partners just about every day in terms of what works for them, what they love about vendors, what they love about programs, what's working in terms of go-to-market, a whole variety of things. One of the topics that I'd like to add today, and this kind of expands on some of the things that Doug talked about, is about the importance of services, and not only services, but managed services as well. And it's going to feature, what I'm going to share with you is the results of some study that we conducted recently regarding partners and the transformation of their business model towards from resale to services and managed services. And so you'll see here, there's a convention where we'll point out some of the key things. I promise I will not read every slide to you, but we'll talk about some of the key aspects of it. What we found in our research was that, and by the way, we went out and got close to 300 responses from senior level decision makers at partners of all types operating multiple business models. So they had a good view into, pretty much all aspects of their business and where it was headed for the next few years. What we found is that, not too surprising, was that almost all of the partners that responded to the survey indicated they were being proactive about the move towards a subscription or a recurring revenue product. You'll see the quote there from one of them saying that it wasn't for the customer. It is good for the customer, but it's actually really good for the business of the partners and the vendor community as well. I'll see if I can progress again. And here again is the convention. Yes, I do seem to have control, so that's good. One of the things we found was that there were two main areas that were driving those changes. Again, think of the people who are responsible for the overall success of the business. And it started, number one, with okay, we need to stay in business long term, and we need to remain viable. You can see there the classic phrase of remaining as a trusted advisor, shifting the business model of the company, and reducing risk for doing that. And that followed in the customer demand that and the changes that customers were looking for to support their operations, the fundamental move from CapEx to OpEx. And you heard Doug talk also earlier about skill shortages and capabilities, in particular with relation to cybersecurity. Companies need to fill those gaps, and they look to partners to be able to fill them more effectively. As a result, partners are really placing their bets in a few specific areas. Services and outsourcing, that goes along with the managed services concept. Cybersecurity and business continuity, disaster recovery, all those things that are related to security. And then the third was hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, public cloud, and a whole variety of areas. So partners are investing in terms of their operations in their business to be able to go after these areas and these different business models. What we found, one of the really interesting things, was that partners of all types and all sizes were already aggressively adding security offerings to their more traditional managed services offerings as well. Think infrastructure as a service or networking as a service. Well, guess what? You can see in the top here that all the classic areas, network, endpoint, data protection, cloud security, were being added, aggressively already across there. When we started to dig into it, though, there were some interesting things that happened. And we broke it down. We broke down the analysis between relatively small partners. You can see here we picked the number 10, but really it applies to partners that are anywhere up to 25 to 30 different employees versus larger partners. And you can see the statistic numbers there. And it was very clear that the larger partners were really focusing on the higher value services. You can see here risk analysis, compliance monitoring, threat hunting, application security, and other types of things. So different types of partners were looking to transform their operations in different ways. And that was something that really came through in terms of some of the research that we did. So let's move on a little bit to some of the economic trends and what's driving that. Complex slide here, let me kind of break it down for you. But what we found was that there were the terms of the agreements, typically multi-year agreements, and the length of the sales cycle varied significantly by the size of partner and the types of products that they were going after. Typically, smaller partners selling relatively commoditized solutions, primarily for endpoint and that type of thing, had shorter sales cycles, shorter average terms and lengths of terms, lasting either a year or less, or month to month, versus typically larger partners selling those more complex services had sales cycles in multiple weeks. In the 8 to 12 week was not unusual at all, but their terms were more beneficial. They were typically 2 to 3 year terms and lots of 3-year terms. So think about the stickiness of that client relationship and the long-term customer value that kind of comes along with it. Wanted to point that out. What we found also is that partners were predicting that more of their employees, more of their services folks were going to be dedicated to delivering these managed services and doing it through the cloud. You can see here that it was a pretty significant increase in that area versus more traditional delivery of either on-premises or one-time type professional services as well. And to go along with that, they are already predicting and are looking to add more higher margin managed services. It kind of goes along with that previous slide. But one of the catches on that is that they will need to address the skill shortages, and they'll need to be able to do that through support, training, and education, and support from their vendors as well. So let's talk a little bit about how they go about making those selections. Who do they choose? Doug also mentioned about just the degree of complexity and the number of options that are out there, the different vendors and the different offerings. And I've walked through those show floors, and frankly, at the end of the day, come back and said, I'm having trouble figuring out what all these companies do, and we're in the business. So let's talk a little bit about how partners look at that equation. And what it comes down to is kind of a funny cartoon that I really love, that says that Einstein actually discovered that time was money. But when it's applied here, it comes down to the vendor's ability to enable efficient selling and servicing really translates to the key attributes of what makes an MSP successful and what they look for in their vendor relationships. Some of the things that they're asking for on the sales side is summarized by enable me, train me, make it easy to do business, and give me field support. You can see here some of the areas that we've highlighted. More technical and services training for pre-sales team, a clear customer on-ramp and off-ramp for technologies and services, and lead generation, volume, and or quality. Lead generation, quality leads, getting good leads, lubricating that front end of that sales process remains significantly important as well. So when we ask them about what are the external challenges that you have, and are tying it to whether the vendor programs are on target, you can see the highlighted area here, right smack dab in the middle, is difficulty in getting the right training and enablement, sufficient marketing support from providers and vendors, and specifically around executing lead generation campaigns. So that keeping that trend going of help me with that front end of that process, help me fill that high end of the funnel is really important. So if you take a look at a little bit more about, we then asked the questions about, okay, what's really driving your operational efficiencies? Think back to efficiencies equals profitability. There are some really specific things that they reported that are impacting that, starting with ease of use of a portal for a range of activities, administration, pricing, consumption, billing, the whole quote to cash process as well. And then access, again, this is a common theme that we talked about before, technical training, and I want to emphasize IP transfer and support so that partners can develop their own high value services, think back to that earlier slide, in terms of development. And then you see a range here. It says here a channel only model. I think a better way to describe it is a channel led or a channel first model in terms of being able to go to market. But again, the common themes below that: full service support, real-time sales support, dedicated account managers, and that functions as a way to, again, smooth the process and make it easier to do business. One thing here that we asked about the role of distribution in there and how they can support. The key takeaway that I want to communicate here is that all those top four are around services, technology, enablement, and less about selling those aspects. So the partners that we asked for were primarily looking for, when they were involved with distribution, that's not always the case, that they were looking for those more technology-oriented things as opposed to some of the others. So one of the things that you can that we hope that you take away here and that you can use independently is to self-analyze a little bit. Look at your own value proposition in light of the things that we talked about just a few moments ago, and really test it in terms of its appeal to gaining commitment and investment and long-term relationships with those key partners along these four axes: the management, the technical teams, the marketing teams, and the sales teams. And fundamentally, management is looking to add new services, recurring revenue opportunities, expand offerings, and really position as innovative. The technical folks are looking for more assistance from the vendors and the capability of bringing top talent in and helping them develop new services packages. And then it flows from there. Marketing and sales fundamentally wants to be able to promote and expand better and promote their differentiations. And of course, the sales team want to be able to clearly communicate, shorten that sales cycle, develop those relationships up in the organization, and really pursue it in that way and kind of shorten those cycles as well. Hopefully that's been really helpful. We want to thank you for letting us share this with you today. And on behalf of both Doug and myself, I'm happy to turn it back to TC.
Thank you, Kevin. That was terrific, and Doug as well. So guys, if you look at the clock, you can see we're running a tick behind. I'm going to ask my panelists and Doug and Kevin to stay as long as they can. I suspect we're going to go to 11:05, and that's probably going to be 5 minutes past, but for those that are attending, I want to give you a full picture of what we're planning here. So I'm going to come back on screen here in a second. We will get you this information after the fact if you need it. But let's start with John Pepler. He's Vice President Worldwide Channels at Bitglass. He's appearing at the top of my screen. John's a dynamic business developer and channels expert. He's adept at creating and maintaining reseller channels, distribution networks, and strategic alliances. In addition to Bitglass, he's worked at Menlo Security, OpenText, Proofpoint, and elsewhere. Then there's also Karen Pater. She is the Senior Channel Marketing Manager with Proofpoint. She has global channels marketing experience with Proofpoint, HPE, Checkpoint, and Nokia. And then finally, we have Matt Cobalt. He is the Senior Channel Marketing Manager at Armis. Matt's a seasoned partner marketing global programs manager with experience in both B2B and B2C marketing. He's skilled in data-driven marketing planning, competitive intelligence, and market development. In addition to Armis, he's also worked at Clarity, Skybox, Actress, and Clio. He's also a Brainiac, studied poli-sci at Northwestern, where I got married 33 years ago today, and law at the Illinois Institute of Technology. Matt, I want to start with you, and I'm going to come back on screen. A lot of good information there from the gentleman. What grabbed you most from some of the things they were presenting? John, maybe you want to take a swing at that while Matt's getting his system up.
Yeah, sure. There were a couple of things. It's great to see data behind things that anecdotally I'm seeing as well. The interest in cybersecurity and public cloud infrastructure investments, and then within that, the cloud infrastructure and cloud application. I've seen that, as well as the drive to subscriptions. I've been doing this 30 years, and I walked away from cybersecurity for about 4 years as I went into e-discovery just recently. And when I came back, it seemed any any retailer with more than 10 employees had become an MSSP. And I was gone from 2013 to 2017. The other thing I saw was that even banks and federal government were using cloud. So it's great to see the stats behind that it wasn't just anecdotal. Driving that was a couple of things. I believe the move to MSSP and subscription services by so many resellers was really that once you got into subscription, you just had to keep the customer happy, and they will continue to renew. And we know this in our personal lives. We used to change banks every time we move our physical address. We don't do that anymore because it's a subscription. It's a learned relationship that we don't want to change. We no longer have to walk into some place. And so, yeah, that has been huge. Once you get into the subscription model, it becomes a lot easier to keep the lights on even when the economy goes bad. In the old days, you better be selling services on the side. So it was also interesting to see that the small organizations don't have as many high value add services, while the large VARs have lots of high value add services because they can still make that investment. Customers have to go somewhere for that. So that was a huge takeaways for me.
All right, and I've got my raft of journalist obnoxious questions, which we're going to get to in a second. But I want to get some more top lines. Karen, let's go to you. What jumped out at you from the presentation?
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep talking about the cybersecurity kind of talent shortage, right? Like we had 2 really high-profile ransomware attacks recently, right? And so we know these attacks are getting more powerful, more painful. Cyber criminals are coming at us with their A game. They don't take off holidays or evenings, right? And so this is putting a tremendous strain on companies to try to stay ahead of it. It's usually the same person.
I think we get a little freeze, if I'm not mistaken, at Karen's end. Matt, let's go to you. Karen started her thoughts. Karen, we dropped you for a sec. I think you paused. Unlike the cyber hackers, I think you took a little break there, but I want to have Matt pick up the baton, then we're going to come back to you, Karen, in a second. Yeah. She talked about the dearth of good talent out there. Talk about what some of the things you found compelling about the presentation.
Yeah, I think the push towards services, we're seeing that with a lot of our resale partners are looking, to be more than just a vendor of a product. They're looking to provide services to their customers and provide services for our product. So I think that was something that was interesting and definitely a shift, even more so I think through COVID that we've seen is the push towards they want to be more of that consultative sell and a more partner to their customers than just anything else.
I'd like the group, let's go to John to comment on something you started with. This is something that has confounded me for quite some time. You went away, came back, and suddenly overnight, a lot of people in the channel are calling themselves MSSPs. What is an MSSP? Because some of the MSSPs that I know are really world-class organizations. They've got their secure network operations centers. They've got certified people on board. They have a CISO. They've got pedigree in security. But now everybody's got an MSSP moniker. So what are you seeing in the marketplace with some of the partners? And then we'll go back to Karen, get her thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the broader definition is MSSP logs on to the admin console and administers the product. And thus, there are a lot of folks out there, smaller companies usually, that don't really have a SOC. They don't really have all the expertise. They're not going to be able to do remediation on the problems. And so they either need to team up with other companies that can do that, or consider how they add that. So the customers are, I mean, every time there's a new threat, there seems to be 10 more companies born to go address that threat. And we're now up to 3,000 security companies. It's overwhelming for the customers, as we also saw in the presentation. There's quite a bit. There will always need to be someone who helps you with, here is what the choices are. And in this case, it goes a step further and says, by the way, you don't have to add more personnel. I'm going to help manage this for you. But you're very correct, and you've got to take a closer look as to, is my MSSP just administrators, or will they actually help solve problems and remediate should something occur?
Karen, is that a concern of yours? Too many people calling themselves MSSPs without really having the bona fides to do so?
We definitely have a bit of that issue. We're trying to operationalize our program. We have, MSPs that are servicing the smaller business companies, and then we have the bigger ones with the enterprise, right? So those are really two different sets. We're really pushing our MSPs are the trusted advisors. They're the bridge between us and the partner and the customers. They're the ones that can really articulate the value, talking to the customers or working through the customers on who are your most very attacked people. Like, they have to know what are their biggest risks in order to mitigate them. The MSPs are the ones that can really get to this. They have more training, a bit more education. And also we're finding they are there. So many customers have that kind of like, oh, it's not going to happen to me attitude. MSPs can really show through demonstrations, data and insights, how they really need these solutions.
Very good. Matt, to you, the talent dearth. When you look out over the partners that you're engaging, do you see a talent shortage? Does it manifest itself where customers aren't perhaps as protected as they need to be? And if so, what can you guys do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been something that has been talked about ad nauseum. I think we see it in almost every article that comes out about a hack. I think we saw it. There was a joke going around. I think that the Colonial Pipeline attack, they put a job posting for a cybersecurity manager like a couple weeks before that. So I think that's stuff that we've seen. I think partners, I've seen some partners fill in kind of a staff aug type roles too, that are starting to do that kind of stuff as well. So I think, yeah, there's definitely a shortage, and I'm not sure what there is to do about it, except for train more people and get more people up and running in the industry.
John, does it impact your organization when you look at the expertise that's readily available in the channel today?
Yeah, no, the lack or the shortage is well known, but that's one thing where the resellers can help the vendors, and the vendors can help as well, in that look for technologies that don't add additional headcount. Look for architectures such as Sassy that actually reduce the amount of products that you're going to need to administer. Look for ways that this becomes more automated. Look for ways that reduce the risks. We define reduce the risk. We define zero trust over here at Bitglass as need to know. You have a user, you have data, what's the need to know between them? And that's all they should have access to. And so you're probably going to see a replacement of things that were things like VPN, where basically you now allow behind the firewall access to people outside the firewall, which comes with its own set of problems and security challenges, to more and more companies, vendors, embracing their form of zero trust, so that it comes down to a need to know basis to get access to that data.
Okay, very good. I want to pick up actually the baton on what you were just saying, and Karen, have you run with it. Let's talk about the thing that kind of surprised me most, vendor consolidation. We thought it was coming, we've heard about it, But listening to both Doug and Kevin say they're walking the halls of some of the bigger events of late, and they're not even recognizing some of these companies and how they can long-term survive in the marketplace. How will vendor consolidation impact your own organization and by way of extension, your channel? And then we'll go to Matt and John.
Did you say starting with me, TC?
Yeah, go ahead, Karen, take that one over.
You did? Yeah. Okay, definitely. Some of our customers are definitely looking to centralize, right, their security, consolidate their vendors into like a single scalable security solution, that's going to suit this modern workplace. Here we are in post-COVID. So anytime partners have companies or can help companies centralize a bunch of fragmented systems or products, into a single platform, they're adding a tremendous amount of value and building loyalty. So that consolidation and centralization is definitely creating opportunities for us and our partners.
Matt, does that manifest itself significant in your world?
It does, and I think it helps if you can be the one-stop shop for all of the issues that they're seeing. And I think it goes back to the talent gap too. If you have 50 different vendors, if you need someone to understand all of them, that's a lot harder than if you have one person who can do it kind of all. So vendors are overwhelmed by just the number of cybersecurity vendors there are, and I think that it's just too hard to sell all of them and understand all of those different tools. So as they condense and consolidate, I think it becomes easier for partners to understand the market too.
Yeah. John, I talk to customers about this very problem, and I'm prone to wearing two watches. And there's an old expression that a guy with one watch knows what time it is, but a guy with two doesn't. And there's some truth in that because they're always different. I sometimes, when I talk to customers, get that same sense. They've bought one of everything in terms of cybersecurity, and they don't know where their gaps and overlaps are. Karen mentioned they're kind of looking to consolidate. So what kind of impact on organizations like yours and your channel will vendor consolidation have in the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, and this consolidation can be within a product line from a given vendor, or it can be across different vendors' product lines. One of the things, advice I give is actually understand whether if you're jumping on a bandwagon such as Sassy, is it true integration? To give an example from our company, we have one admin interface for all our products. Once you learn how to develop a policy for one product, you know it for all of them. There is no other interface to log into. In fact, we also have multi-tenancy, so the resellers managing multiple customers can jump to the next customer without logging out and logging in. So really understand, was something just rubber stamped on this to say, oh, it's integrated, or oh, it's part of Sassy, which, by the way, Sassy to us is you're coupling network security with cloud security. And so just that definition off the bat, you should have less products and less products to log into and go administer. So there is a bit of investigation needed. There is no good housekeeping seal that says this really is Sassy or this really is part of a common framework. And again, that's where the VARs can come in handy to help out with all that.
Very good. Kevin, I want to go to you while John's dealing with his guest in the background. If he's got anything to add, we'll bring him on into the conversation there, John. So we've heard about XDR, Sassy. What are some of the other trends that maybe when your organization looks at the areas you want to get into, what are the hot ones that are impacting your company most?
Yeah, that extended detection and response is a real big part in our product, the threat response auto pull or trap. So it's an automated kind of remediation tool that's going to automatically pull out malicious emails from users' inboxes and anywhere it might have gotten sent, right? Even the most sophisticated users cannot always recognize the attacks, right? And we're clicking stuff, or so if something evades other security measures, then this trap XDR will catch it, and so that's a big trend going on for us right now.
Okay. Matt, I want to take a look at the channel itself. We talked a little about the MSPs and the sheer number that are claiming to be so, but let's also look at so many other partners are jumping into cybersecurity. How can an organization like yours, because we do have a lot of other vendors on there, maybe some newbies, and practitioners, channel practitioners themselves, how can they differentiate themselves to stand out in the marketplace, so like a vendor like your organization will recognize and distinguish them as a true go-to partner?
I think it goes both ways, but being easy to work with as a partner and as a vendor. I think that building out plans and really getting into the weeds of how you're going to work together and making sure that you have an understanding of what you're going to do together. I think too many partners kind of look for that one-off deal and look for that short win. And I know that I'm looking for partners who will make an investment into Armis and in any company that I'm working at. That the partners that are willing to make an investment into both time and money, and learning your product and learning how to sell it. That's a lot better than kind of those partners who just bring you deals here and there. So I always talk to my channel directors about let's make sure that we onboard partners correctly and get them ramped up so that they really do make an effort to be a part of our ecosystem, not just kind of coin operation.
Good. John, I want to ask you the same question. When you look at your ranks, how do you determine what are your highest performing partners, in addition, obviously, to revenue, but who are the good guys? Who are the go-to guys and gals? And that's an inside joke we were talking about, my hackneyed anachronisms from the time back. But how do you differentiate the good partners from the run-of-the-mill?
Well, it comes down to mindshare. And by the way, cameo by my son, who came through a few minutes ago. It comes down to building mindshare. So it's not just what the past performance has been, where would the future performance be? And some of the key metrics are willingness to invest in education, invest in certification, invest in account mapping, getting together with the local reps. And so we're constantly looking for separating out who are the folks that are going to run with this versus who are the folks that are kind of bearing a gift and they're one and done and will come back out of convenience. And if you measure using perhaps a PRM, who's taking your training, what levels of it, what certification, it makes a huge difference in being able to distinguish between the two.
Very good. Now, for those that are attending, we're going to go about another 5 minutes. If you need to run, we understand. But for those that are participating today, we're going to go about another 5 minutes and wrap this up. The conversation's too good to bail. John picks up something, and Karen, I want to ask you, and then Matt as well. Automation, it's helping experiences. Partners' expectations of experiences now are much more elevated. How are you guys leveraging automation? What are the new expectations that partners have?
Yeah, definitely. We've just rolled out our in-partner PRM since December, and we have built a number of automations, which is really amazing with the tool. We really like it. We've built some workflows to optimize the administrative tasks, right? Like speeding up the onboarding, and that's saving the partners time, makes it a little easier to get started. We have some infrastructure workflows as well to keep partners informed about their deals, about their training, right? And that helps keep them on track. We're also planning some engagement workflows. Hey, we noticed you haven't logged in, and stuff like that. So the automation is tremendous, and with the tool, it's like if you can dream it, you can probably build the automation. But I am noticing now, the more automations that you build, the more complicated the whole picture becomes, because automations might be connected or overlapping. So you really need kind of a map to make sure you're keeping it all clear.
I want to go to Matt next, but I cannot overlook. So John, we're going to come to you after Matt gets a chance to take a bite at that, talking about why you smiled when you heard the word complexity. But Matt, some of the new expectations your channel partners have based on some of the experiences they're getting with other vendors, and obviously with you and some of the investments you've made in automation.
Yeah, I think Karen hit the nail on the head there. We're a small organization. It's too hard for us to go in there for every single partner and give them the tools they need. So automating their journey through, from the day that they sign an NDA with Armis all the way through the first sell, the first deal registration. I think that's really important. And I think our PRM system is set up similar, it sounds like, to Karen's. You can log in and get everything you need out of Armis kind of without calling your channel director, without calling the local sales rep. I think those relationships are really important, obviously, and those channel directors and those field guys really need to build those relationships. But I think COVID made it different in building relationships, because they're not going out for drinks and they're not going out to lunches. So the expectation really was not spending all your time on the phone with individuals in that onboarding process, and getting a lot of the automated training and a lot of the automated deal registration and looking at your opportunities and all that kind of stuff can be seen in one place. And I think kind of the partner journey through the organization has changed, and it's really become, the expectation is that it's more automated than it was.
So what was once a nice to have is now table stakes, and the partners expect and demand that you have. John, to you laughed about the you get automated, you get all these capabilities, but then complexity creeps in. Give us your wisdom there.
Yeah, that's true with so many things. The more granularity you give, the more flexibility you give, it can become a much more complex environment. And so I was laughing because I'm kind of thinking, all right, now we're trying our own medicine with the options all of Karen, Matt, and I companies give our customers in order to manage and keep that manageable. So as Karen said, if you can dream it, you can probably do it. The workflow automation really comes down to, can you reduce the manual work? Can you reduce the number of errors that you used to get because of manual work? And can you reduce friction? And if you do that, everybody has a much more, a better experience. And again, you increase your mind share.
Very good. And now I'm going to ask, we're in the lightning round. I'm going to ask Doug and Kevin to come back on screen, have our Brady Bunch moment. We're going to go to a close. Karen, we'll start with you. One trend, cybersecurity channels 2021 and beyond. What's your closing parting take?
We're going managed services, definitely managed services.
Very good. Matt, how about yourself?
I think there's the heavier focus on the partner journey through kind of the organization and the vendor organizations.
Doug Cahill.
Oh, just one? TC, you're killing me. You know what? I'm going to go culture.
Minutes, Fred.
I know you did. That's fair. I will say culture. I think cybersecurity needs to be a team sport, and organizations, everybody in the business needs to accept that cybersecurity is their responsibility, not just the cyber team.
Ooh, that was a good one. John, to you?
I would say relationship. One thing we learned during COVID is people didn't want to meet new people. And so we went all out in expanding our use of distributors and bringing on board much more partners, and then quintupling the channels team to deal with that. So relationship is key.
Very good. Kevin, I'm going to come to you last. Special thanks to Kevin. This would not have gotten off the ground without Kevin Roan's support and participation. So from the bottom of my heart, two guys that have worked at two of the same shops and never, really our paths never crossed. But Kevin Roan, your final thought.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pile on a little bit to what Karen talked about, but put an extra twist on it, and that is the shift to managed services and services in general, but the added importance of both vendors and partners being in the same economic boat together. So enabling them to make the economic transfer, to have access to techniques and talent, and most importantly, capital, to be able to make that transformation smooth from an economic standpoint is really critical. That to me is, I see that as an important lever, and if not attended to properly, some degree of risk.
Fantastic. Well, we can't end any better than that. So on behalf of John Pepper, Karen Pavey, Matt Coppold, Doug Cahill, and of course, John's son as well, let's not forget, and Kevin Roan, this is TC Doyle. Thank you on behalf of the partner. We'll make sure that you guys get these assets, recording to that. But again, on behalf of the panelists, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for tuning in.